Addison, David's younger sister, had a close friend named Avery who often came to visit them. Despite the significant age difference, they didn't socialize much, and David only had to joke around with the girls, causing them to perceive him as superficial. On Addison's birthday at the cottage, an unexpected romance began. Without her parents, it was a carefree and joyous summer day, imbued with a sense of freedom. David and Avery found solace on the riverbank, taking refuge from the noise of the party. It was during this time that Avery revealed herself to David from a different side. He found her to be a delightful conversationalist, talking passionately about her many hobbies. At that moment, David felt the first rudiments of love for her. Back at their friend's house, holding hands, they surprised everyone with their newfound connection. They decided to get married when Avery was only 18 years old, much to her parents' shock. They wanted her to focus on university rather than marriage. However, the young couple remained adamant, and in July, after receiving their high school diplomas, they officially bonded in marriage. In the end, Avery's parents had to come to terms with their decision. After becoming a married couple, Avery and David began thinking about a home of their own. On their first wedding anniversary, they gave themselves a small apartment bought on credit. They lovingly renovated it, turning it into a cozy nest for their growing family. David had teased Avery about her addiction to the phone. It was always with her wherever she went. In the kitchen, the bathroom, even the toilet. It often seemed like an extension of her arm. Avery good-naturedly pretended not to be offended by his remarks. Sometimes David managed to snatch the appliance from his beloved's hands and put it out of reach on a high shelf. This often caused Avery to become angry. Despite this, the relationship between Avery and her husband remained friendly. Sometimes they even spent evenings together with friends, having nice social gatherings. David's jealousy for his wife was very strong, to the point where he did not want to be separated from her for even a moment, even in the presence of his own sister. Avery came home from work one evening feeling particularly exhausted. She immediately headed for the shower, hoping to wash away all the negativity of the tiring day. Meanwhile, her husband offered to make dinner and set to work. To his surprise, Avery's cell phone remained on the kitchen table, which was different from her usual habit of always carrying it with her. Apparently, this day had been particularly challenging for her. This brought a smile to David's face. As he walked by, he noticed that there were several messages on her phone. Curiosity took over, and he quickly glanced at the screen. He was shocked to see multiple messages, one of which immediately caught his attention. It was from a man named Robert. David raised his eyebrows in surprise as he read the content of the messages. The unnamed man was expressing intimate feelings to his wife that even after 7 years of marriage, David sometimes hesitated to express. Glancing around, he saw that the shower was still running, which indicated that Avery would be out soon. Shocked and confused, David decided to talk to this man who was sending such explicit messages to another man's wife. Flipping through the correspondence, he recognized Robert in the photo. It was Avery's childhood friend. Her mother had mentioned him once, but David had chosen to remain silent. Now it was clear why. Their relationship had clearly surpassed the boundaries of friendship. The man had written her love letters and sent intimate photos, clearly never meant for anyone else's eyes. Avery didn't hold back either and reciprocated his feelings. When David discovered his wife's correspondence, his grip on the phone tightened so much that it caused him pain. Instantly, a plan for revenge formed in his mind. David took a picture of the screen with their conversation and other incriminating details, sending it to himself. Unaware that her phone had been used, Avery emerged from the shower as David pondered on how to hurt the cheater even more. 2 weeks later, it was Addison's birthday, and her husband promised her a surprise. He secretly arranged with her mother to invite Robert to the celebration. Everything else would be taken care of by David. David selected a cafe and printed out Avery's correspondence in the form of a book, which he planned to distribute to all the guests, including her parents. He didn't consider how they would react. All he cared about was teaching Avery a lesson. As the desire to exact revenge burned inside him, the feelings of others became inconsequential to him. When the awaited day arrived and the guests began to gather at the cafe, David anxiously waited for the moment when his wife's lover would appear. Finally, Robert entered the hall, clutching an excessively large bouquet of flowers. Addison visibly grew nervous upon seeing her old friend heading towards her. "How did you end up here?" the birthday girl asked, smiling uncomfortably as she accepted the bouquet. "Your mom invited me, said we wanted to surprise you," Robert replied, wrapping his arm gently around her. From the outside, they appeared as youthful friends, hiding the explicit words and pictures they had shared. David clenched his teeth tighter, feeling anger building up inside him and causing his throat to go dry. Finally, everyone took their seats. Avery was visibly nervous, constantly stealing glances at her lover. Her husband noticed this, taking solace in the thought that he would soon expose the two of them. David allowed Addison's parents to give the first two toasts. They warmly congratulated their daughter and praised the son-in-law for organizing the celebration, causing David to feel a twinge of guilt about ruining the moment. However, he was determined to follow through. When his turn came, David began his speech. He recounted the story of how he and his wife met and the 7 years they had spent together. Tears welled up in Avery's eyes. Seizing the moment, David distributed printouts to everyone at the table. His mother-in-law caught a glimpse of the pictures and clutched her chest in shock. "What is this?" Addison's father muttered, confused. David pointed at his wife's lover and said, "This, Dad, it is your daughter's correspondence with this man here. It seems you forgot to mention that cheating is wrong." A heavy silence fell upon the table. Finally, Avery jumped out of her chair, grabbed a glass of wine, and poured it on her husband. She angrily accused him of ruining her party by embarrassing her in front of her guests. David could hardly contain his anger and refrained from striking her physically. His wife's behavior resembled that of a small rabid dog barking incessantly at its prey. Suddenly, her lover approached her and tried to calm her down by putting his hands on her shoulders, while challenging David with a defiant look. When his patience wore thin, David gave his opponent a powerful blow that sent him collapsing right at Avery's feet. Shocked, she screamed and rushed to his aid. Meanwhile, onlookers gathered around the fallen man, and David quickly grabbed his jacket off the rack and left the cafe. The divorce that followed was an agonizing and protracted process. Avery demanded too much of David, and he had no choice but to resist her demands. Despite his desire to settle the matter like reasonable adults, Avery continued to be stubborn. Acting on her emotions, she kept calling him, getting into arguments and insisting on her own way. David understood that her behavior was driven by resentment, but he couldn't ignore the way she publicly humiliated him on her birthday. Exhausted by the endless conflicts, he finally gave in to Avery's demands. He rented a modest apartment in a remote part of town, hoping to avoid further reminders of her infidelity or ties to her family. However, news of Avery's activities still reached him through mutual acquaintances who felt it necessary to inform him of her life. Undoubtedly, she was receiving similar reports about him as well. He knew that his ex-wife and her new partner had moved in together, bonded, and enjoyed a happy marriage for 4 years. The bliss was shattered when it was discovered that Robert had become addicted to gambling, resulting in significant debt. Avery had to take 2 jobs to make ends meet. She could not abandon her husband and helped him to pay off his debts, making sure that he did not get into more trouble. Addison's ex-husband often reminisced about their past and wondered how things might have turned out differently if she hadn't betrayed his trust. However, time could not be turned back and past mistakes could not be undone. The only thing left for the woman to do was not to make any more mistakes.